Welcome to the Blue Collar Startup podcast where hard work meets big ideas. This is your home for real talk, real stories, and real strategies from the front lines of life in the business of the trades. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Nelson from Five Towers Media.
And I'm your other host, Derek Foster, Delegate Cleaning Systems.
Yeah, you
What's
are.
happening, Mike? I feel like it's been a while since we recorded. We got a little bit ahead, and
Yeah. Well, we took what was it? We took last week off for sure. Did we take the week off before? Oh, we did because I messed up. Big shout out to our guests that we're recording tomorrow because yeah.
it happens. I get it. Running around, doing what you got to do, running a business. It happens. So
All of a sudden you're in a bad position and you realize you're supposed to be on a laptop in front of your computer on a podcast, and not gonna happen. So I am looking forward to that episode. We'll more to come on that one. But yeah, no, things are good here, D. I'm excited. We just had a lamb hit the ground the other day on Saturday, so we got our first lamb of the season.
nice.
Yep, got a couple more. We're waiting to pop out any moment here, and we got pigs off to the processors, and lots of farm chores, man, getting the farm open. That is for sure. Spring.
The list keeps growing, I'm sure, as the weather changes.
It's not getting any shorter. That's for sure. What about you, man? How's things in your world?
Things are good. We're super busy. We got a lot of things moving on some different fronts. We've got a couple robot rollouts under our belt so far. So it's good helping people set those up and help, I guess, provide some relief to their staff and people who are just struggling to keep up with the day-to-day maintenance tasks that they have. So that's been good, and yeah, we're super fortunate there, and I don't know. I think it's going to be a very busy summer.
Yes, sir. And we just launched you a beautiful new website.
Yeah, you guys did a great job, and shout out to your team. Obviously, they really put a lot of effort into it, and we're super excited. I think that launched today, if I'm not mistaken.
It's there yesterday. It's live right now. I
Yeah.
know that for sure because I was on it doing some work earlier.
So if anybody's curious, check out our new website.
That's right.
www.dagleclean.com.
All right. Well, let's get on with the show here. I know we're trying to shorten the intro a little bit here, guys. So we're gonna get right into it. We've got one of our business lab episodes today with Bill Tansey from the OpEx shop. Bill, welcome back to the show, sir.
Yeah, guys, speaking of taking some time off, I think we had a little gap too, thanks to, I think it was my end, some scheduling difficulty. So here we are.
I don't know if it was your end or my end or D's. It was somebody's end.
Either way.
Yeah, all good. Let's appreciate all the time that you're putting in here, Bill. Obviously, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we obviously look forward to having you back every time you can make it on the show. So welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be back, guys. I appreciate it. These are, it's funny. The first one I did, it was such a weird kind of speaking engagement, the first podcast, but they're kind of fun. I like hanging out with you guys on these things. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
We've been told we're fun to hang out with.
Yeah. I tell people that I hang out with Derek and Michael now, so it's
Yeah.
I support that message. And hopefully we're just about finished up with our kitchen here. We're going to move back out to the garage, get that garage finished so we can start getting some live episodes back into play as well. So hopefully we'll be able to be physically in the same room again here soon.
cool. Selfishly, I think I mentioned I want to be the first podcast in the new studio. So see if you can get me in. I don't know if I'm fighting somebody for that or not, but
We'll make it happen, Bill. We'll make it happen.
number one.
And just for our guests too, if you're not familiar with Bill, Bill's been on the show a few times now, and now we do a special segment with him. But you can go back through the episodes. There is actually on our YouTube channel, there is a playlist of just Bill Tansey. So you can check him out, all of his episodes and all the knowledge he's been dropping on us here over the last few months. So check that out. And let's get in some questions, Bill.
Cool. Well, I got to go back and listen to those, make sure I don't tell the same stories more than once, That's all right.
So,
What do we got?
all right. So first question, and this is one we've kind of covered a little bit, but I think with some of the other questions we're asking today, it's kind of a good way to set the stage. When a small business owner comes to you and says everything feels like it's on fire, and I honestly, personally, I think everybody can relate to that. But yeah, right. What's the very first thing that you do to figure out where the real problem actually is? And to give a little more context to that question, it's like, as a business owner, there's so much stuff going on, and if you're in a chaotic, hectic business, it's like, I think, do I fix this first? Do I fix this first? So I like, how do they figure out where to start?
Yeah, I think we have. Now that you mention it, I think we've talked a little bit about that before. And man, I wish I went back and listened to it so I knew.
So you don't contradict
Think of something. Yeah, try and give a different perspective this time and not repeat. Either way, maybe it's helpful. So I'm not sure if this is a different perspective or not. But what? Yeah. So anyway, so jumping into that some version of that statement, everything, my hair's on fire, everything's on fire, they're burning the place down. Some version of that statement is super common. Um, Of course, that's a pretty emotionally charged, response, and not to say that that's inappropriate. We've all had those, oh my goodness moments. But the first order of business is to turn those emotions down and bring out some actionable data. So in an effort to bring out actionable data, what we do is something. It's a formal process that we call problem definition. And forgive me, maybe we've talked about this before. I don't know, but problem definition is sorting through inference to get to only data. And we use that data to illustrate a handful of things. So the first is we illustrate visible symptoms or effects only. We don't speculate on cause. So what are the visible symptoms that you would characterize everything's on fire? Well, only half my employees show up to work every day. Margins are down, whatever, right? So we try and talk in terms of visible symptoms only for starters. And then as we talk about those visible symptoms, it's really, really important. Again, we're trying to get to data and we want to illustrate a performance gap. So a performance gap, for example, like let's say we're talking about your wife comes home and says, I can't merge on the highway. What do you mean you can't merge on the highway? She's like, the car's slow. Can't really work with that either. So what do you mean the car is slow? Well, the car is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, but it's taking 9 seconds to get to 60. Now that's a performance gap, right? So we can think about that as well. If you say, well, none of my employees show up, and then we get to the actual performance gap and we say, well, there's supposed to be 6 at every station on every shift, and we only have enough to get 4 on every station, every shift. Now we've got a performance gap, right? So we try and illustrate visible symptoms. We try and illustrate a performance gap. And then kind of, as I've been alluding to, we really try to get to quantifiable information, right? So again, employees aren't showing up to, we're down 5 employees per shift or something quantifiable. And then finally, we want to time bound this problem definition. So when did it start? When did it end? Or when did it change? So the place started burning down yesterday, or it started burning down a month ago, or it's been burning down since I started and I'm just sick of it, right? So when did it start? When did it end or change? And then what's the scope is the last component. So if the place is burning down, well, is the whole place burning down, or only building 1 and not building 2 and building 3? Or is it only third shift and not first and second shift? So the scope of the symptoms, where do they start? Where do they end? How broad or wide are they? Or how far reaching are they? So we'll go through this process, and sometimes it's overt. Sometimes I'll have built trust with somebody and I'll say, hey, I'm going to take you through the problem definition process. And other times it's covert, haven't really built trust yet, can't really run them through this. They think I'm nuts. So we just kind of do it without them knowing. And I'm kind of going through this in my head. And then I'm able to brief back to them in meeting minutes or in a summary later that says, hey, when we met, you said the place was burning down. And if I understood correctly, this is what I hear you saying. And, I give them the visible symptoms only, the performance gap, we quantify it, we do the scope, we do the time bound, and we kind of rough this thing in. And if we can get to a quantifiable, data-driven problem definition, then we can figure out the root cause and eliminate it. So whether it's me or somebody else can dive in and say, okay, now it's really clear what the problem is. We can go eliminate it. And the last thing I'll say is this problem definition thing. if you skip it or if you do a lousy job at it, all the work you do to follow is usually waste because you didn't clearly define what you're trying to go after. So if you take, the half-ass approach to this or what have you, and then playing whack-a-mole, whatever it is, you'll spend a lot of time. And we've talked about waste before on the podcast, in, creating waste. So there's an old adage, and I don't know if it's true or not, but like, if you've got 1 hour, spend 50 minutes defining the problem and 10 minutes fixing it, basically.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to get that right. So, yeah, so that's how we turn that emotional response of the place is burning down into actionable data that we can then take action on, make decisions, and drive a value
Start solving problems.
or solve problems.
Start putting the fires out.
Yeah.
What are some of those common problems that, I mean, are from business to business? Obviously we're talking in the blue collar space, but are some of those problems consistent from company to company that you see?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the symptoms that you see can sometimes be very specific to the customer or to the business. So I can give some examples. A service business, definitely, blue collar style organization. They provide a medical service, right? So, talk about nurses, therapists, et cetera, that kind of thing. Definitely, I think falls in the blue collar designation. There's a change in Medicare reimbursement rates, and that, as you may know, medical reimbursement rates govern kind of far beyond just Medicare, and they kind of govern that industry in a large part. So there's a change in Medicare reimbursement rates that changed their margin pretty much overnight, and they found themselves in a really bad spot. So that's one example of visible symptoms. Another is post-COVID. A production facility's yield was way down. So, yield is producing good products, not waste or products that need to be reworked or scrapped, right? So their yield, used to be, I'll make up a number, 96%. So they have 4% scrap or rework. And post COVID, that 96% yield was down in like the low 70s. And again, I'm being a little liberal with the numbers, but to draw the picture. So, changes in margin, changes in yield, those are common ways that all of a sudden everybody feels like the place is burning down, like, because they're playing whack-a-mole, they're running like crazy, they're trying to fix this yield problem, but they can't fix the symptoms fast enough. And that's always the case, right? We have to define the symptoms and then go look for the root cause and address the root cause, to get these wrapped up. So, yeah, does that give you an idea, Derek, of kind of some of the stories are common?
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
All right, next question, Mr. Tansey. A lot of blue collar business owners are still the ones answering the phone, quoting the jobs, doing the work, and handling the billing. At what point does wearing every hat go from hustle to liability, and how you recognize that you cross that line?
Nobody's gonna like this answer. Easy. You say liability, so I'll say risk. So day one, that's a risk, that's a problem. And yeah, so day one, it's a problem. So what do we do to navigate that liability, right? I mentioned risk a minute ago. So day one, it's a liability. What do we do to manage it? That liability, if it's not characterized, is chance. It's just out there. You're taking a chance by doing everything yourself or wearing all the hats. The difference between chance and risk is in order to get to risk, which is a good thing, we want to get to risk, we want to get away from chance, we need to characterize or quantify that chance. And when we characterize it or quantify it, then it's understood, it becomes risk. And then we can decide whether or not we want to mitigate that risk or leave that risk out there just to loom as is, right? So just like anything in life, like you could take a chance. You could cover your eyes and run a red light, right? That's chance. Or you could look to your left, look to your right, and then run a red light, right? Two totally different circumstances because you've taken chance, covering your eyes and running the red light, into risk. I looked and there's straight roads on every side. There's nobody as far as the eye can see. If I run the red light, there's a very low likelihood that I'm going to hurt somebody or myself, right? Not that I advocate for running red lights, but I did just come back from downtown. And every time I'm in downtown, I see somebody with inflated sense of self-importance running red lights. So that's on my mind. So back to your example of wearing every hat. If we, one of the ways we could like characterize wearing every hat is we could say, well, as the business owner, what is it that you want to do or think you're good at versus what is it that's a pain in the ass to do or you don't like doing or you're not good at or takes too long to do. And we could kind of create this list, these two lists, right? One list of the things the business owner has as their core competence, what they're good at, and one list of what they're not good at but feel compelled to do. And now we've characterized taking that chance or that liability, as you said, and we've created this risk scenario that says, okay, do we want to mitigate the risk or not? And when do we want to mitigate it? So now we should quantify it. So how do we quantify this one? Well, maybe we say, all right, of all these things you don't want to do, let's set a series of milestones or triggers or something that when the business achieves a milestone or a trigger, this thing that you don't want to do because you're slow and don't like it and aren't good at it gets outsourced for or hired for or solved with AI or sent overseas or whatever, lever we want to pull to offload it. So I think a liability like wearing all the hats is a problem from day one. And yeah, that liability, we need to treat it like risk in a business. And in order for it to be a risk, we have to characterize and quantify it. And then once we do, we can make smart decisions around it and decide, what we want to run after first.
Is there like a gauge or a meter that or a value that you like assign to risk that says like, okay, this has become such a risk at this point, I really need to delegate it and get it off my plate?
Yeah. So to make those decisions, we like to quantify stuff. So for example, how do we know? Well, we know because, let's say we just do like a quick time study. Where are you spending all your time?
Mhm.
And if you have a simple pie chart of your time spent all week, and if this one block is like 70% of the pie chart and then everything else is squeezed in, well, we got to ask ourselves, is that 70% the job of the leader of the business, or is it not? So that's one way to kind of quantify it, or like one trigger to look out for. A big one's always money, right? Basically. So if there's financial goals that need to be met for the business to be successful, or for the person that's running the business to feel successful, are those financial goals being met? If they're not being met, there's another reason to go after it. And it's interesting too, because this probably kicks open the discussion about being self-employed versus running a business, right?
Mhm.
So if you're wearing all the hats, are you running a business or are you self-employed? And what are your aspirations? If you're self-employed and making enough money, maybe that's all you want to do is keep wearing the hats and fighting fires, and you thrive in chaos and you like to be responsive. But if you want to make more money, or you have a desire to own a business and run a business for another reason, that could be a motivation as well to chase after that problem.
Okay. All right. Next question. There's a difference between being busy and being productive. I actually heard this referred to recently as, how did he say it? Motion does not mean progress.
Oh, I love it. You're setting me up because I know where I'm going with this one.
Hey, everybody, just taking a quick break to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Curtis Lumber. Curtis Lumber is the professional's choice for home improvement. From windows and doors, roofing and siding, decks and building packages, to floors and more, trust the pros at Curtis Lumber for expert advice and daily delivery. For locations, visit curtislumber.com. That's curtislumber.com.
There's a difference between being busy and being productive. I actually heard this referred to recently as, how did he say it? Motion does not mean progress.
Oh, I love it. You're setting me up because I know where I'm going with this one. Yeah.
So how do you help a business owner who generally can't tell the difference anymore because they've been in the chaos so long it just feels normal? busy or productive?
Yeah. So on the podcast before, I've mentioned some of my mentors that I've had along the way. One of them's name is Roger. And Roger talked to me about this in a slightly different context once, and it really stuck with me. So he had a great way to characterize it. There's what you're talking about is busyness or motion, right? You're just going all the time. Well, there's three types of motion. There's rotation, there's vibration, and there's translation. So rotation, you can think of as if you're standing in one place and spinning around until you're dizzy, right? That's an example of rotation, right? Vibration might be standing in one place and jumping up and down repeatedly. And translation simply is moving from point A to point B. So if we start to characterize this busyness or this motion into those three categories, it's pretty quick to figure out which one of those three actually creates value and which two don't, right? So translating, moving something from point A to point B creates value. But vibrating and rotating just don't create value. They just make us feel busy and give us something to complain about. So just like we talked about characterizing risk before, if we characterize the motion, the busyness with vibration, rotation, and translation, we can, again, if we build lists of our day and how it was spent, we can pretty quickly decide to focus our day on translation. And now that we're talking about, there's a second component to it as well, not just focusing our day on translation, but leading our teams towards translation. And most importantly, rewarding our teams or ourselves, patting ourselves on the back when translation prevents vibration and rotation. There's a difference between responding and preventing. So it's one thing to understand the difference between those three types of motion or busyness. And then it's another thing to use the translation to prevent the rotation and the vibration.
So you mean like you if you're focusing on translation, like say with your team, you're focusing on getting them to move things from point A to point B, then vibration and rotation essentially becomes not possible.
So it's always possible to vibrate and rotate. So like an example of that is somebody sitting at their desk worrying, right? So they're in their head worrying and they can't go, they can't move, they can't take the next step because they're worrying, right? So that's one. I was working with a client this morning on exactly that. I had to get her some kind of actionable steps to get her moving again because all this stuff in her head that she was managing was just had that look on her face, like she was sad and like needed to go sit in the sun for a little while, which is probably a good idea no matter what. But my job in support of her as a coach or an advisor is to get her those first steps to get her moving in the right direction again. Right. So that's an example. So it's always possible to vibrate or to spin, but to rotate. But yeah, as leaders, it's our job to make it much harder for people to fall into those traps and eventually make it impossible, as you say, but that always find a way nonetheless. And then we got to pull it back out again. So
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to think about the things that I've been doing recently on if I'm vibrating or rotating. Because I feel that way.
yeah.
I don't always feel like I'm moving things from point A to point B. I don't know about you, D.
I'm in the same boat. You know, I've had to sometimes step back and ask myself, is this, you know, number one, the role that I need to be doing, but or can I be more productive with my time? You know, back to the question number two, but it's constantly, I think, evaluating that. And sometimes we don't, as small business owners, we don't always have the resources at our fingertips to say, hey, I should offload this to so-and-so when that individual isn't there. So, but I think, you know, definitely being aware of that and moving in the right direction to be able to offload those things that may not be making you most productive. I think over time it takes care of itself.
You know, oh, go ahead there, Bill.
No, I was just going to say that with, what Derek said, I think the biggest thing in that case is pat yourself on the back when you prevent the vibration and rotation. So like when you did something different today than you did last week and it prevented this whole circle of nonsense, right? That's when you pat yourself on the back. So, I mean, maybe that's as simple as changing your procedure. So when you show up to someone's house to quote a job, you're one and done. Like you're right. You go back to your truck, you finish the quote, you hand it to them before pulling out of the driveway, right? Versus last week, you had to pull out of the driveway and then you forgot. And then the person called because you didn't get on the quote and it started this whole vibration rotation, right? So I think the biggest thing as a, when you work for yourself or as like a sole proprietor is patting yourself on the back when you make that change and you prevent that vibration rotation, that non-value added work that you had to do last week. This week, you don't have to do anymore because you were thinking ahead or because you learned from last week.
It's interesting. And we've kind of talked about it on the show before, but I essentially have my own like personal operating system as far as like the things that I do to keep the ball moving forward. And but what happened recently, essentially the whole month of like March, was I got so busy with all the firefighting that I stopped doing all the things that actually help me. Like one thing is planning my day the night before. I create my critical task list, like Andy Frisella talks about, right? Here's my 5 things I got to do tomorrow. That's a piece of it. That was one of the things I stopped doing. A couple other components I stopped doing. And so like the whole month of March, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man, I just felt like I was vibrating and rotating. And then I just last week was like, I need to be more disciplined and do this every day and do this every day and do this every day. And I'm starting to feel more like I'm moving it from A to B, but it's easy to fall out of it, man, and to not realize that that's what you're doing.
It's really easy to get sucked into that or to fall out of it. Yeah. There's a whole cross section of people that I've come across throughout my life that pride themselves on being in that and like putting the long hours in to vibrate and rotate the shit out of it. Like, pardon my French, but like, I can't tell you the number of people that I've come across that take pride. Oh, I worked 10 hours yesterday solving all the problems. Well, you know what, dude, that's nothing to be proud of. Like you should work 10 hours of preventing the problem from happening again, and then the next day you don't have to work 10, you work 9.5 and you prevent them from happening again and you work 9. And then the day after, right. And then as time goes on, like that, there's a whole book, right? The 4-hour work week, like, so yeah,
Yeah.
that should be what you're proud of. The person that can pat themselves on the back is a person working little to no time and collecting big paychecks, right? That, like that's the answer. The answer isn't rewarding ourselves or bragging about the amount of time we spend, vibrating and rotating.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up 4-hour work week. I don't know if Tim Ferriss says this specifically in the book. And by the way, for listeners, amazing book. I don't know that working a 4-hour work week is realistic for most business owners. However, the ideas to work towards it are very applicable. One of the things that I realized in the month of March was I was doing so, and I'm saying it this way now because of our conversation. I definitely, when I thought about this in March, I didn't phrase it this way, but I was doing so much time vibrating and rotating that I needed to like make some decisions on what I needed to let go of or what I should be doing with my time. And so I came up with this, I need to either automate or delegate, basically is my sentence right now. I either need to automate or delegate, or it's just got to go. As a company, we're not going to do it anymore. If it requires me every single day to do this and I can't automate it or delegate it, then that means it's preventing me from moving things forward, translation. And it means that I'm just sitting there rotating and vibrating. And yeah, it's automate or delegate, baby. But that made me think of that because of the 4-hour work week, which that's essentially what Tim talks a lot about in that book, is finding ways to do those two things.
Yeah, sometimes it's like an emotional pull too. Like I'll find that, before I go to that next appointment, I want to wash my truck. And I like washing my truck, right? So it makes me feel good to wash my truck. But sometimes I have to fight with that. Like, is that translating right now, Bill? Like, does the truck really need to be washed, or is that just something that makes you feel good? And it's really vibrational rotation in the context of what we're talking about. So I think, everybody has those things, whatever, they are. And undoubtedly, like some of the, like going to the gym, very healthy. Washing the truck, probably not necessary. I get my haircut every week. Well, I don't know. Is that necessary? Like, could you do it every 2 or 3 weeks and take some, so everybody kind of has those emotional pulls or those compulsions to vibrate and rotate, or not everybody, but I think a lot of people do and can probably relate to that as well. So I like automate or delegate, and sometimes we have to kind of check ourselves of what's in our own brand, Yeah, doom
Yeah.
scrolling is probably the worst version of it these days,
Doom scrolling. Yeah. That's why I deleted all that crap though.
Yeah, I applaud that. I tell you, it's good. I'm reducing, but I haven't separated from yet.
I'm almost I'm a month and a half. I'm 6 weeks clean of social media doom scrolling.
Nice. You definitely need a little coin or something for that.
All right, next question. When you are trying to bring structure to a company that has none, what's the one place you almost always start? And why does that tend to create momentum in other areas of the business?
All right. So what's the place when trying to bring structure? What's the place? I like the improved format, the more rapid fire. Like you said, we're going to be faster with the format here. So
Yeah. I'm trying to be more structured, Bill.
all right. Well, we'll see if it's rewarded by the market. Um, more and more, I'm reminded of this. The place that we start is making sure everybody know who owns what. So what am I in charge of? What does success look like? And when I say who owns what, by the way, I don't mean like Michael's in charge of this, Derek's in charge of that. I mean, the CEO is in charge of this and the COO is in charge of that. If we take the names Michael and Derek off of it, you could replace it with somebody else, but it's still the responsibility of that role in the organization. So um, the way that we do that is something we have spoken a little bit about on the podcast before, and that's making sure there's a mature standard organization design in place. And what that simply means is there's a set of standard roles, for example, CEO, COO, framer, electrician, roofer, standard roles. And those roles are organized on one piece of paper in a way that demonstrates the hierarchy. And there was a point in time, and maybe it still is the case, where like hierarchy turned into a bad word, and that's a whole bigger discussion probably. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think there's appropriate hierarchy in every organization. Can you overdo it? You bet you can. Can you underdo it? I mean, a lot of organizations tried like 10 years ago and failed, right? So you can definitely underdo it. But ultimately, we want to know who's in charge of what. And the way we do that is by organizing a set of standard roles in a visual chart that shows some level of hierarchy. And if we do that successfully, it checks a handful of boxes, right? So, and it starts to bring the structure that you're asking about. The first box maybe is it checks the DOR box, division of responsibility. Quite simply, it means, what departments are responsible for what and what is an effective handoff between departments, right? So maybe you've got the estimator and you got the people doing the work. Well, what is the DOR of the estimator and what is the DOR of the doers doing the work? And what is an effective handoff, right? Critically important. And then once you have that, you can start to say, okay, well, what does success look like at an individual level? So like we said before, at roles, at standard roles, not for Bill or Derek, but rather for the standard role that they're serving in the organization. What does success look like? Does Bill know what is expected of him today? And if he leaves today having done this, he can feel successful and it moves the organization forward. And then that kind of thinking just continues. So what's the role of leaders versus doers, right? And once you have leaders and doers, you can start to have clear expectation setting. Now, expectation setting is usually communicated from the leader to the doer, right? And something that's often forgotten is you can have clear escalation from the doer back up to the leader, escalating successes as well as shortcomings and learnings so that we can do better tomorrow. So having that standard, establishing who owns what in really layman's terms and building that out in the ways we just talked about, division responsibility, communication, escalation, standard roles, what success looks like in the role is more and more, as I do this work, becoming obvious that must be in place first. And that's the first thing to create structure or standard around.
Now, we're not just talking about an organizational chart.
No.
Right?
No.
Like I want to make that if that's not the case, I want to make sure that we're clear about that, because we've talked a lot about org charts, but it's not just that. It's that with other things.
Well said. Yeah. So the cool org chart is one small part of it. You know, that's the one page that illustrates the hierarchy and how these roles work together to be successful. But and you have to have that in order. Let's use, for example, expectation setting. If I come to you and I'm like, hey, Mike, today I'd like you to do X, Y, and Z. You could look at me and be like, who the F are you, Bill? You're my subordinate, or you're my peer, or you know, or you just don't like me, right? I mean, like, it's that simple. But if the org chart says I'm your boss, and if I'm the guy, quote, signing your paycheck and doing your annual reviews, and I'm the one that determines whether or not you get the raise, you know, 6 months from now, there's a different response when I say, hey, Mike, I'd like you to do X, Y, and Z today. Now, that never replaces good leadership, and that's a whole separate, huge discussion. But at the end of the day, it's really important that when I show up and, quote, boss you around, you know my role in the organization, right? Otherwise, asking you to do something is a lot more challenging and a totally different thing. And likewise, if I come to you and say, hey, I need help with this, you know, your answer could be, yeah, it's my job to remove roadblocks and help you because I'm your boss. But if you're not my boss, you might say, you know, piss off, dude, I got my own work to do, right? And so without that org chart, you cannot have it. Effective expectation setting or escalation, like I, you know, kind of just tried to outline.
Okay. All right. Last question. Then we're going to jump over to the YouTube only special segment for our listeners. If you heard about the Patreon side of things that we're doing, we decided to sunset that, take it out from behind the paywall, give it to you guys free, but you can only get it on YouTube. So you got to go to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, all those fun things, please. Last question before we make that jump. What is the biggest mistake you see small business owners make when they finally decide to get organized, where they think they're fixing things, but they're actually making the chaos worse?
Through this rapid fire thing, I got to get better at making my answer shorter. I feel like as soon as I'm done, I keep getting next question.
It's not, no, I know. I'm not, there's not as much massaging in between each questions, but
yeah. That's all right. So,
I'm taking this is like, you know, I'm stealing this from Sean Ryan's playbook. You know, he's got a specific question set out. He's reading right from the question. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to be like Sean Ryan. Bill.
I love it. But I'll tell you right now, I'm not down for a 12-hour podcast unless you have an estate like John that we can hang out on in the evenings and do the fun stuff that they do on his estate there. So
yeah, cool. We'll go to your house or mine. We'll shoot some guns. It'll be great.
Yeah, shoot some guns. We need some heavy equipment to dig some holes too. He's got a bunch of heavy equipment there. From
he does. Yeah,
I got a tractor. Right? Yeah, me too. For that matter, it needs a hydraulic line. That's another story. Biggest mistake, right?
Yes. Trying to get organized. Biggest mistake. They think
the biggest mistake getting organized. Yeah. So awesome. One of my first clients when I stepped out on my own years ago, was a guy running a business and he had a senior team, and there was like 4 or 5 guys on that senior team. And I got asked to come in and support him and his senior team. So now fast forward, like, I don't even know, a dozen years later, I recently, the fall of 2025, I bumped into one of the guys from that senior team. And that business has since been sold. The guy that I was working with exited. He made a killing. And all the guys on the senior team are kind of finding their way now and taking their chance at being the president of other companies and that kind of thing. So, and by the way, this was in fact a blue collar company in the energy industry. Guy's name is Matt. So I bump into Matt and I'm excited to see him and curious how he's doing. And he seemed genuinely excited to see me and excited to tell me what he was doing. And he's like, Bill, I'm leading a team now and da-da-da. And I mean, he was leading a team then, but he's the president of the company, I should say now. He's leading the company. And he goes, and I just finished writing all the standard work for my guys. And I thought, man, I wish what he had said is, I just set new expectations of my leadership team and coach them to develop standard work. And that was, he really highlighted, I think, a really common mistake. The people that are ambitious, that are stepping out for the first time leading a company, like he was for his first time leading a company, they tend to want to do everything themselves or guide everything themselves as opposed to grow and lead their team. And it was a big difference from when I was working for his boss, supporting the leadership team he was on a dozen years ago. His boss said, basically, Bill, come in and teach my guys, help me lead them effectively. When he got in his boss's shoes, he just did the work. He didn't teach and lead. And I think that's the biggest mistake, that when people see how good this stuff works that we're talking about underneath this operational excellence umbrella, when they see how good it works, they're bought in and they're excited. And in his case, he just ran and did it. He didn't bring his team along and teach and coach them. And I think that's the biggest mistake when it's people's first time to lead and they've had some of these experiences and they've listened to some of the stuff and learned and done it, is they take off running full steam ahead and they wind up like doing the work and handing it to people. And in my experience, that's a recipe for a major fall down, if not a failure, unfortunately.
I have an employee that's going to be really pissed at you. And the reason for that is because as I'm listening to you say that, it's making me think about a project in our company that I just decided that we need to do, which essentially we're sunsetting an old server solution for websites that we've been using for a few years, moving to a new solution, making some changes there, better security, blah, blah, blah. And I made the decision we needed to do this. And I told Kelsey, who's going to be the team member that's pissed at you, that I was just going to do it, that I was going to work with our technical team and make this thing happen. And as you're saying, I'm like, oh, this actually is in her scope of work. Like, she actually owns this project and I'm now going to do it for her, which I shouldn't be doing it for her based on what you just said. I should be coaching her on her doing this. So yeah, she's going to really not be happy about that, Bill. I'm totally going to blame you too when I tell her about it tomorrow.
Yeah, well, tell her we didn't have the episode yet. You didn't know. Now you.
That's right.
And I'll share this with you too. You know, one of the best things you can do in that case is sit down with Kelsey and build out an action plan with her. So that way you have input on the action plan, the steps she's going to follow, and roughly the time it's going to take to execute those steps. And then she can run and fill in the blanks, right?
Mhm.
And actually do the work. So I think that's one of the most, it sounds silly, but it's one of the most powerful things as a leader is to sit down and collaborate with the person. And one way that you can do that and make it actionable, which is super important to me, everything I do is focused on a actionable outcome that adds value. And that's to rough in an action plan. And that action plan could be 5 milestones. It could be 50 at the high level, depending on the scope and depth of this project. But sketching that in, I think, is the right way to hand it back or hand it off, or to engage them initially and look for them to deliver. And then as you sketch out that action plan, there should be really definitive points in time where they come back and connect with you one-on-one, and then you can coach further and guide at those times. So maybe that's something to do with Kelsey, is to sit down and rough in an action plan and maybe bring it back to her and let her own parts of it if there's still a way back.
Okay. I forgot to ask you to tell people if they want to talk to you or learn more about you, where do they find you?
Right. Yeah, I love it. I didn't even, so the rapid fire, I was having trouble keeping up. I didn't even realize that you.
I know, I'm boom, boom, boom. Tactical, baby.
So thanks. Yeah. The classic way, William, in parentheses, Bill Tansey Jr. on LinkedIn, or my website, theopexshop.com, or old fashioned now, email bill@theopexshop.com to get me via email. And always welcome opportunities to talk to people, even if you're not sure. Coffee's cheap. You can buy me a coffee or a virtual coffee, and we can meet online. It's easy.
All right. We're going to jump over to the YouTube side of things here, guys. Make sure you jump over with us. You can search us out on YouTube, Blue Collar Startup, which got to be on there somewhere. Thanks for listening, of course. Thanks to all of our sponsors that help to make the show possible and help all the work in the community that we do because of the show possible. You can find us bluecollarstartup.io, and of course, podcasts on Rumble, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks everybody for listening. Bill, thanks for joining us on the main show. Don't go anywhere. YouTube segment next.
And that wraps up another episode of Blue Collar Startup. A big thank you to our sponsors, 5 Towers Media, Daigle Cleaning Systems, Daigle Fire Solutions, The Michaels Group, Martin Electric, MLB Construction, Bonaccio Construction, Peoplease, and Catamount Consulting for making this podcast possible. And thank you for tuning in. If you learned something or felt inspired, connect with us on our website at bluecollarstartup.io or email us at hardhat.bcsu@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions and topic ideas. Help us spread the word by sharing the show and following us on social media for updates. Until next time, keep on building, keep on dreaming, and keep hustling like your future depends on it.